How many master's degrees? Oh boy. And how many of you went to college? Everybody keep your hands up if you have a college degree, a master's degree, or a PhD. How many of you expected to retire from the company where you were working? More than half the room. How many of you have cashed out your 401ks? Yeah. IRAs? Savings accounts? How many of you are beginning to feel a little bit desperate?
Woo! Well, good questions there from 60 Minutes' Scott Pelley this past week, talking with a group of unemployed folks in Silicon Valley whose unemployment benefits, 99 weeks on, are ending. Benefits they never thought they'd need. There are new numbers out, although you'd hardly know it. The crisis, it turns out, is no longer just about low wages, but no wages. Pulitzer Prize-winning economist and the author of the best-selling book Free Lunch, David Cay Johnston, joins me next. David, welcome to the program. The numbers that you caught, released October 15th, came out and went with barely a murmur. What was in them?
Well, they weren't reported at all for 10 days till my column came out. They show that every 34th person who had a job in 2008 had no income from work in all of 2009. That's 4.5 million people. There's 1.5 million people who join the workforce each year because of age. So that's 6 million people who had no work whatsoever. Total wages, average wages, and the median wage, half above, half below, all declined compared to 2008. And the median wage, which is $505 a week, was lower than it was back in 2000 when you adjust for inflation.
You're talking about 1 in every 34 Americans with no wage at all in 2009, people who had worked in 2008. How are those people getting by?
Boy, I don't know. Undoubtedly, some of them are getting unemployment for up to 6 months of the year. Some of them are relying on the support of family members. I've had to help support some of the people in my family. And some of them are the folks who are seeing show up who had 2-income families with their children at food banks. One of the reasons food banks are experiencing this tremendous increase in demand is the number of families where both parents do not have work.
So you have a wage-less problem, but there was also bad news when it comes to wages. What's happened to them?
Well, wages have been flat in this country now for a long time, and except in one area that I wrote about, and that is at the very top. In 2007 and 2008, there were about 140 workers who each made more than $50 million, and they averaged about $90 million each. But in 2009, there were only 74 of them, but their average salary and bonus was $519 million. That's almost $10 million a week. Now, this isn't selling your business. This is not hedge fund managers. They're not in this data. This is salaried workers whose salary and bonus was $519 million on average. It's more money than the bottom 19 million workers in America made together, these 74 people.
So during the year that we are reading every kind of headline about recession, possible depression, everybody desperate, you've got a group of people who, if I just heard you right, went from earning $90 million a year to $500+ million a year in that 1 year, that kind of a jump?
Yeah, just in their salary. And from what little we know, because this is a statistical report, there's only one CEO in America who qualified for that list, Larry Ellison of the Oracle Corporation. In all likelihood, most of these people are Wall Street traders, and that brings up a really important issue to understand. When President Bush bailed out Wall Street, he did not wipe out the shareholders. He did not wipe out the executive deferral accounts. He did not demand any reforms of their pay practices. When President Obama bailed out Detroit, he wiped out the shareholders of General Motors and Chrysler, and everyone had to take a pay cut. I haven't been able to determine yet whether they wiped out the executive deferral accounts, but they should have. But it's very important to grasp this difference. We have created a system now where the remaining big firm on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, has a close to monopoly position. It is able to exercise unbelievable influence over the markets. And we've literally given them a $5 billion gift, which I wrote about in another column. So we need to recognize that government policy, not some natural force, but government policy is causing this enormous shift in who makes money and who has a job.
But what happened in 2008, 2009? And I just want you to restate it, because often we talk about those policies that created this situation beginning back in the 80s.
Well, yes. What happened in this country was from 1950 to 1980, the closer you got to the very top in income, the less your income grew. And the incomes of the bottom 90% of Americans actually grew at twice the rate of the people at the top. Starting in 1980, that reversed. And now, the closer you are to the top, the further and further up your income goes, until we get to the very top group, the top 400, who are making about $1 million a day. Their tax rate is 60% lower than it was back in 1961. It's about 45% lower than it was back in 1993. And by the way, they got a bigger tax cut from a law President Clinton signed than from all the Bush cuts combined. But we are creating, through tax policy, regulatory policies, subsidies to companies to move jobs offshore, the way the bailout was done on Wall Street. What we're doing is taking work away from the vast majority and concentrating incomes at the very top.
Elections are supposed to be a leveling moment. However rich you are, you just get one vote. We've been covering a lot of stories about campaign cash this election season and the consequences of the Citizens United decision. You know the numbers. You know where we're at. When you look at this election and think about those 74 people, what do you say to the rest of us who say, what's the point of this exercise? How can we have a democracy with this kind of imbalance?
Well, we need to get out and vote. That's the most crucial issue, because otherwise, in fact, corporations are going to own the government. You know, when Antonin Scalia wrote his portion of the decision in Citizens United, he argues he's an originalist. How he could make that argument in this case is bizarre, because when the Constitution was adopted, corporations were strictly limited by the government. They could only operate in one state. They could only exist for about 20 years. They were not the kind of global, eternal organizations that we have today. And I think that puts the lie to Mr. Scalia's claim that he pays strict faith to the original intent of the Constitution. United Citizens is to the growth of corporate power what the Big Bang was to the singularity.
David Cay Johnston, there's a link to his reporting and his books at our website, GRITtv.org. Talk to you again soon, David.